The morning my son-in-law flew to Chicago for his so-called regional sales conference, my daughter did something she hadn't done in almost 3 years. She made coffee. Not the instant stuff she'd been surviving on, the kind you just pour hot water into and stir. I mean real coffee, ground beans, the old percolator her mother left behind, the one that takes 12 minutes and makes the whole kitchen smell like a sundae. She set a mug in front of me without saying a word, sat down across the table, and looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was 9 years old, and had something important to say, but didn't know how to start. I'm 64 years old. I've buried a wife, run a hardware business for 31 years, and raised 2 kids mostly on my own after Carol passed. I know when something is wrong. I've known for a long time. But I also know that some things you wait. You don't push. You watch and you wait and you pray you're wrong. I wasn't wrong. Her name is Audrey, my daughter. She just turned 31 in March, and I remember thinking at her birthday dinner, the small one, just the 3 of us at her house, because her husband insisted they keep it low-key, that she looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. She used to laugh loud enough that people at other tables would turn around. That night, she laughed twice, both times at something he said, and neither time reached her eyes. Her husband's name is Spencer Caldwell. He came into our lives 6 years ago, introduced at a neighbor's backyard cookout, wearing a button-down shirt in July, like he was trying to impress someone. Audrey brought him to meet me 2 weeks later. He had a firm handshake and a story for every occasion, and a way of finishing other people's sentences that I mistook, at first, for enthusiasm. He was an insurance adjuster. Good job, stable income, owned his condo outright. By the time they got engaged, I had talked myself into believing my instincts were wrong, that I was just a father who didn't think anyone was good enough. Carol would have seen through him in 10 minutes. I gave it 2 years. After they married, things shifted slowly. So slowly I kept second-guessing myself. Audrey stopped calling as often. When she did call, she sounded like she was reading from a script. Everything fine. Spencer says hi, we're busy, but good. She moved 40 minutes away, which isn't far, but Spencer always had a reason why Sunday dinners were hard, why holidays needed to be split differently, why Audrey was tired and couldn't really talk. Then, about 2.5 years ago, she was in a car accident. Nothing catastrophic. Another driver ran a red light, hit the passenger side. She had a concussion, some soft tissue damage in her neck and shoulder, and what her doctor initially called an adjustment disorder. Anxiety, difficulty concentrating. She took medical leave from her job at the elementary school where she'd been a reading specialist for 5 years. Spencer handled everything. That was the word people used, handled. He drove her to appointments. He dealt with the insurance claim. He managed her medication schedule. He worked from home for a month to be there for her. Everyone said how devoted he was. My sister said she wished her husband had been that attentive when she had her knee surgery. I said thank you and smiled and felt something cold move through my chest that I couldn't name. Because here's what I noticed, and what I told myself I was probably imagining. Audrey didn't get better. Month after month, she stayed exactly as diminished as she'd been in those first weeks after the accident. The doctor kept adjusting her anxiety medication. Spencer would call me sometimes in that careful voice of his and update me. Audrey's having a hard week. She's not really up for visitors. Maybe give it another few days. I started driving the 40 minutes anyway, unannounced. And half the time when I knocked on the door, Spencer would answer and say she was resting. Once I saw her through the window before he got to the door. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking out at the backyard. She didn't look like she was resting. She looked like she was waiting. I brought it up to her doctor's office once, not accusing anything, just asking. The nurse was polite and said they were closely monitoring her progress. I later found out Spencer had been present at every single appointment. Everyone. I'm not a man who uses words like gaslighting. That's not how I grew up, not how I talk, but I know what a cage looks like. I've just never seen one built out of concern before. The week Spencer left for Chicago, I didn't expect anything to change. He'd traveled for work before, short trips, And Audrey always seemed more anxious during those times, not less. Spencer had explained that to me too in his careful way. She doesn't do well when her routine is disrupted. So when she called me that Tuesday morning, I picked up expecting to hear the tight, careful voice, the one that said everything was fine in a tone that meant please don't ask. Instead, she said, "Dad, can you come over?" Just that, no explanation. Her voice was different, not distressed, clear, the way it sounds when someone has made a decision. I was in my truck in 4 minutes. When she opened the door, she was dressed. Actually dressed, not in the oversized sweatshirt and leggings that had become her uniform for 3 years. She had on jeans and a blue sweater I hadn't seen before, and her hair was pulled back, and she looked at me and said, "Come in, I have things to show you." She'd made the coffee, real coffee, and on the kitchen table where Spencer usually kept his work folders and his laptop, there was a manila envelope and a yellow legal pad covered in her handwriting. I sat down. She sat across from me. She put her hands flat on the table, the way someone does when they're steadying themselves, and she said, "I need you to know that I'm okay. I'm actually okay. I've been okay for a while, and I need to tell you what's been happening." What came out over the next 2 hours rearranged everything I thought I understood about the last 3 years. The accident had been real. The concussion had been real. The initial anxiety and difficulty concentrating, real. But somewhere around 6 months in, something had started to shift. Audrey said she began sleeping better, started feeling clearer, wanted to go back to work. She told Spencer, he told her she was pushing herself too fast, that her doctor had said to be careful about overcorrecting, that she should give it more time. She went to her next appointment and asked her doctor directly about returning to work. Spencer was in the room. Her doctor looked briefly at Spencer, then back at her and said they should revisit in another few months. After that appointment, Audrey said, she started noticing things. The way Spencer spoke for her when she hadn't finished speaking. The way her medication made her feel foggy in the morning, genuinely foggy. The kind that made it hard to read, hard to focus, hard to feel like herself. The way her world had narrowed quietly and completely until it was just Spencer in the house and the schedule he managed and the phone calls he was always nearby for. She started researching her medication on her own, quietly, on her phone, in the bathroom, which sounds dramatic until you understand that Spencer had administrated access to their shared laptop and had a habit of mentioning, casually, things she'd looked up. The medication she'd been on for the past 2 years, the one her doctor had prescribed for the anxiety, had a documented side effect profile that included cognitive blunting and emotional flatness at higher doses. She was on a higher dose. She found the original prescription bottle in a box in the closet and compared it to the current one. The dosage had been increased twice, both times during periods when she'd mentioned to Spencer that she was feeling better. She stopped taking it, not all at once. She was careful. She'd read about tapering. She did it slowly over 8 weeks. She told no one. She kept acting exactly the same. I needed to know what was real, she said. I needed to see if it was actually me or if something else was going on. Within 3 weeks of tapering, she said, she felt like herself for the first time in years. She cried for an entire day, and then she got up and started making a list. The legal pad, on the table, that was the list. I picked it up. 17 pages of her careful teacher's handwriting. Dates, amounts, account numbers, notes. 3 years of meticulous, quiet documentation that she had assembled on her phone and printed in batches at the library 2 miles from their house. Here's what she'd found. The insurance settlement from her accident, the one Spencer had handled, had been substantial. The other driver had been at fault, their insurance company had settled, and the amount deposited into an account she'd never seen statements for. A joint account Spencer had set up in both their names, with his email as the statement address. Her disability income during her leave had been deposited into that same account. When she'd been well enough to theoretically return to work, Spencer had filed for an extension of her disability leave, using documentation from her doctor. She hadn't signed those forms. He had a power of attorney that she had signed in the early foggy weeks after the accident, for medical and financial decisions while incapacitated. She had forgotten about it. He had not. The account had over $90,000 in it. Audrey had never touched it. She wasn't sure Spencer had spent much of it yet either. She thought he was waiting. For what, she wasn't entirely sure. But on his laptop, which she accessed one night when he left it open, she'd found a search history that included property listings in Costa Rica and a folder of saved real estate photos and an email thread with someone whose email contained the word relocation. She looked at me across the table. Dad, I don't think he was planning on taking me with him. I have never in my life wanted to put my hands on another person the way I wanted to in that moment. I'm telling you that honestly. I sat there with my jaw tight and my hands wrapped around that coffee mug, and I breathed slowly, and I thought about Carol, because Carol always said that the best revenge is a good lawyer and a documented paper trail. I'm glad I thought about Carol. Have you talked to anyone else? I asked. Anyone at all? She shook her head. I was waiting for you. I told her to pack a bag. Not everything, just what she needed for 2 weeks. I told her to leave most things exactly as they were. I called my friend Walter's son. Not Walter himself, he passed 3 years back, but his son who took over his law practice in town. And no, actually, I don't want to use that family's name here, so I'll just say I called the best attorney I knew, a man I'd done business with for 15 years, and I told him I needed an emergency appointment and that it was family. He saw us at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Audrey walked him through everything: the legal pad, the printed bank statement she'd photographed at the library, the screenshots she'd saved on her phone, including the real estate folder and the relocation emails. The attorney was quiet for a long time after she finished. Then he said, "This is a significant case. We need to move carefully and we need to move fast." The first thing we did was contact her doctor's office independently, without Spencer present, and request a full review of her treatment history. The doctor, to her credit, was shaken when she understood what Audrey was describing. She said she had no record of authorizing the dosage increases that Audrey had found on the later prescription bottles. She said she wanted to review her files immediately. The second thing we did was contact the insurance company that had handled the accident settlement. Audrey's attorney submitted a formal inquiry regarding the account setup and the disbursement authorization. The third thing we did was get Audrey out of that house. She stayed with me. She slept in her old room, the one I've kept exactly the same since she left for college, and the first morning I heard her up at 6:30 making coffee in the kitchen. I stood in the hallway for a moment and had to hold on to the wall because the relief of it nearly buckled my knees. Spencer came home from Chicago on a Friday night. He called Audrey's cell multiple times that evening. She didn't answer. He called me once, voice very controlled, saying he was worried had I heard from her. I said yes, she was fine. She was with me, she needed some space, and I said it in the tone of a father who doesn't explain himself to his son-in-law. His attorney contacted her attorney 6 days later. What happened over the following 4 months, I will summarize, because some of it is still in process, and my own attorney has asked me to be careful about specifics. But here is what I can tell you. The medical review found that 2 prescription increases in Audrey's medication file had been called in by phone using Spencer's cell number, not by her doctor's office. Someone had called the pharmacy claiming to be from the doctor's office and requested the increases. The pharmacy had not verified properly. This is now part of a formal complaint and an ongoing investigation. The power of attorney Audrey had signed was reviewed by her new attorney and found to have been applied far beyond its intended scope. Actions taken under it, including the account setup and certain forms filed on her behalf, are being contested. The $93,000 sitting in that account is currently frozen pending the legal proceedings. Spencer moved out of the house in early November. I am not going to describe what he said to me the one time we were in the same room together. I will say I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Audrey went back to work at the school in January. Part-time at first, then full. Her principal, a woman who'd worked with her for 8 years, had kept her position open. I didn't know that until Audrey told me. Apparently, her principal had told Spencer a year ago that whenever Audrey was ready, there would be a place for her. Spencer had never mentioned it. I go over on Sundays now. Real Sundays. The kind we used to have when the kids were young, when Carol was alive and the house smelled like whatever she'd decided to put in the oven on a whim. I bring the coffee because Audrey's percolator gave out in February and she hasn't replaced it yet, and I like having something to carry through the door. Last Sunday, she was laughing at something her friend had texted her when I came in, that big loud laugh that makes people at other tables turn around, and I stood there in her kitchen doorway holding a bag of ground Sumatran, and I thought, there she is, there's my girl. I spent 3 years worrying I was wrong. I spent 3 years second-guessing what I could see with my own eyes, because he was very good at making doubt feel like wisdom. I wasn't wrong. A man who controls someone's medication, isolates them from the people who love them, and quietly prepares to disappear with money that was never his. That man does not get the benefit of the doubt. Not from me. Not anymore. I'm 64 years old, and I have learned one thing that I wish someone had told me earlier. When something feels like a cage, it usually is. The bars don't have to be made of iron. Sometimes they're made of prescription bottles and carefully worded concern and a handshake that's just a little too firm. Pay attention, trust what you see, and never ever let someone else's version of your child become the only version you accept. I keep coming back to that Tuesday morning, the coffee on the table, Audrey's hands flat on the surface, steadying herself, the legal pad, 17 pages of her careful handwriting that she had put together quietly, alone, over months, while pretending nothing had changed. That image tells me everything I need to know about who my daughter is. Not the version Spencer had constructed for 3 years. Fragile, dependent, unable to manage her own life without supervision. The real one, the one who figured out what was happening to her, made a plan, and executed it with more discipline than most people twice her age could manage. She did it without making a single mistake that would tip him off. She did it while still showing up to every appointment, still answering his questions in that careful voice, still performing the role he'd assigned her. And she did it because she had decided she was going to get herself out and she was going to do it right. I think about the kind of character that takes. People talk about integrity like it's something you either have or you don't, like it's a personality trait you're born with. I don't believe that anymore. I think integrity is a choice you make every single day, usually when no one is watching and the easier path is right there in front of you. Audrey could have confronted Spencer the moment she started feeling better. She could have panicked, tipped her hand, given him time to move money or destroy records, or simply turn it around on her in a way that left her with nothing. She didn't. She thought it through. She gathered what she needed. She waited until the moment was right. That's not just courage. That's wisdom applied under pressure, and it's the reason everything that followed was able to hold up. Spencer, on the other hand, made the mistake that people like him always make eventually. He believed his own story. He'd told himself and everyone around him that Audrey wasn't capable, wasn't sharp, wasn't functioning. He'd said it so many times and for so long that he stopped watching for signs that it wasn't true. He left for 2 weeks and didn't think twice about it because in his mind, she wasn't a threat. She was a condition he managed. That arrogance is what undid him. The moment you stop paying attention to the actual person in front of you and start only seeing the version you've invented, you leave yourself completely exposed. I think about what I could have done differently. Whether I should have pushed harder, earlier, instead of second-guessing what I could see with my own eyes. That's something I'll sit with for a while. But I also know this. I stayed present. I kept showing up even when Spencer found reasons why I shouldn't. I drove the 40 minutes unannounced. I knocked on that door. I didn't let someone else's careful narrative become the final word on my own daughter. That consistency, just refusing to disappear from her life, is the only thing I did right in those 3 years, and it turned out to matter more than I knew. What Spencer built was designed to look like care. That's the part that still gets me when I think about it too long. The most effective traps are the ones that look like something else entirely. But here's what I've come to understand. Genuine care makes people stronger over time. It builds capacity, restores confidence, opens doors. What Spencer provided did the opposite. Every month she stayed in it, she became more isolated, more dependent, more managed. That trajectory is the tell. You don't need to catch someone in an obvious lie if you're paying attention to the direction things are moving. Audrey is back at school now, full days, and I bring the coffee on Sundays because her percolator gave out in February and I like having something to carry through the door. Last week she was already laughing when I got there. That laugh, big and loud, the kind that fills a room, is the only proof I'll ever need that I was right to stay in her corner no matter what. Some things you just don't let go of, and some people, no matter how hard the world tries to tell you otherwise, you never stop fighting for.